Welcome everybody to the February program meeting, and our speaker tonight is Josh Miller. I already remembered to start recording, so that's a good thing. And I want to welcome you to our virtual operation. As we said before, we expect that we're going to be virtual through the spring. And just to remind folks, what I think everybody knows is that we're coming to you both from Zoom and Facebook Live. Just before we get started, I'd ask those that you are on Zoom, if you would mute your mics. That way we don't get distracted by background noise, or if your wife yells at you or that kind of thing. Yeah, there you go. And I realize that every participant has a different way to view the meeting, and that's kind of interesting. I suggest that you use the side-by-side or speaker view. And what my view is going to control what goes out on Facebook, but it may look different depending on how you've got things set up. Want everyone to participate and ask questions, but please realize that it is virtual and we can't see each other to know. So only ask a question or two, and be careful, don't interrupt. And keep your comments and opinions and stories for another time. For those of you on Facebook, please know that we want you to fully engage. Bob Carlson and myself are monitoring Facebook, and as you pass along comments or questions, we will pass those too. So feel free to participate through the comments, and we'll get your questions to the speaker. All right, so what we're gonna do is Josh is gonna share on one of his most secret flies first, and then I'll share some club announcements, and then get right into the presentation. So, well, let's stop the share. Josh, I think I'm gonna spotlight your phone, right?
Yes, please.
All right. Wait, I had it already. Spotlight for everyone. There we go, buddy.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me today. I'm excited to be here. I wish it was in person, obviously, like, the old days. But I'm going to share a pattern, a little stonefly pattern, and then do a little talking later on some nymphing techniques. Just please ask questions. Like Kirk said, just any way to interact, any way I can share any knowledge with you guys. I love it, and I'm just thankful to be here. This little pattern we're going to tie is just a little kind of golden stonefly. Pretty simple, maybe 5 materials, quick and easy to tie. We're tying on a jig fly. It's a size 14 with a 3.2 millimeter tungsten gold bead. Any questions before I start? Can you guys hear me okay? Does everything sound all right?
Sounds good. Can hear you. Looks good too.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Awesome. All right.
But by the way, for folks, if you're on Zoom, to unmute, you can just tap on your space bar and talk just like a walkie-talkie, and it works really good.
So I used to fish a lot of stones, but big ones, like size 4, 6, 8, especially out west. They work great. But fishing slightly smaller stones, I've had a lot more luck on our streams in Pennsylvania, because a lot of our fish are slightly smaller. But this is a good winter pattern. It's a little bit more meaty than the size 16 and 18 flies I usually fish, but it's just a little golden stone and it'll be good for your box. So we're going to start this with 6/0 thread in tan color. It's going to build up a little bump behind the bead. Back to the bend. Use some bi-aughts for the tail. Just like you would tie a prince or a normal stone, I'm going to tie them on either side, first on the close side of the hook and then the far side, matching the tips. And I want the natural curve to be inward. Okay. And one trick to keep the body tapered so there's no bump is I'm going to cut these here so it'll be flush with the bead. Now for the body material on this fly, I'm going to use this micro tubing in black. So for the dubbing on this guy, I'm going to have some gold ice dub. Just take a little bit out here. And if you're going to tie this in a bigger size, like maybe a 10, 8, and a bigger bead, like a 3.5, 3.8, or 4.0, I'm going to taper the thread a little bit just so that bead isn't so, big compared to the size of the body. Take some of this gold ice, dub it real thin. So an important part of a lot of my flies is keeping contrast in the fly. And this black midge rib is going to do that for sure. Wrap 1, 2.
Hey, Josh, those that use stub as a pistol tub, do you tricks to get dubbing new to lay down?
Kirk, you keep muting and unmuting.
Oh, sorry. Let me try that again. Thanks. So that ice dub is a pistol to dub. Any tricks on how you got a nice noodle like that?
Yeah, for sure. When dubbing with ice dub, I will rip it apart so it's thin and it's not as long of fibers. That's definitely a trick way to dub it. Any synthetic materials are going to be a little bit tougher to dub with. You can use wax and stuff, a little bit of oil on your fingers, but I just rip it apart, keep it thin.
Well, that's a good idea.
So to finish this material, what I do is I wrap around the thread 1, 2, 3 times, and then come up to my body, and that'll secure that ribbing in place there. That gives that a real nice contrast. So like, if you want to have, I'm going to put 2 more bi-aughts on the front. If you want to have them stick out from the body, you can put a little, like a bump of dubbing right here, but I want to keep the fly real thin. So I'm going to grab 2 more bi-aughts. Tie one on the close side, slightly longer than the shank of the hook.
Josh, I don't know if you said those are goose spots. Is that right?
Yeah. On the far side, 1, 2, and then the trick to these is, and anytime I use bi-aughts, I fold them forward and get at least 3 wraps on top of them. That'll lock them in place. I'm going to come in and trim them. Tags here. So I'm going to put a little collar on this fly using a little brown, iced up, golden brown. So this is a little trick I'm going to call the lazy man's loop. Just wrap the dubbing around the thread. I'm just going to get one good wrap. It's just gonna add just a little bit of long fibers there without having to do a dubbing loop. I'm gonna come in a little bit more dubbing. Before I whip finish, what I do is have about 1 inch of dubbing on the thread, and I use that on the thread to hide the thread when I finish the fly there. That's it.
So you just whip finished with the dubbing loop right in the jam knot.
Yep. I just add that, and it'll help hide that thread. You know how like anytime you tie a fly, you see that collar or thread right there. You know that kind of hides it.
Yeah. Now, do you?
So
I noticed you put like a whip finish on at the end again.
just one more, yeah.
Just one more. Okay, and that'll hold good.
Yeah.
Cool.
You know, I've put super glue and stuff on flies, but these flies, I lose them in the tree faster than they fall apart half the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. But
Hey,
cool.
Josh, we had a question come through Facebook. Somebody asked if what size this was. They missed that.
It's a size 14 hook with a 3.2 millimeter tungsten, and that's a gold bead on there.
Hey, Josh, what other sizes would you use for like PA streams for this?
I'll do them in 12s and 10s, but this is kind of the key size for sure. I don't fish many bulky big flies as much as I used to. 14s and 16s is 99% of what I use.
And so you're clearly going for a really thin profile. Is there a reason for that on that?
Yeah, it'll sink faster, and we'll talk about that stuff in the presentation for sure.
Okay, cool.
Any other questions?
Cool. All right, no questions. No questions on Facebook. I think we're cool.
Awesome. Simple, quick tie. Thanks for watching, guys.
All right. Well, Josh, you warned that this was going to be quick, so let's roll right into the presentation. Or roll back to the presentation. Let's see, and let me get the spotlight set up here. Okay, good. So, let me just share a few club announcements here. As I mentioned at the beginning, COVID's got us in avoiding indoor meetings, and we're expecting that's going to go through spring. So the board of directors is really working hard to have virtual operations, do everything virtually, and it takes an unbelievable amount of work to do this. So thanks to a lot of people on the board who are just stepping up. The main way we're communicating through email, through the MailChimp and Facebook page, the new page, and hopefully you're paying attention and getting what you need. And just to share that FFI and Eastern Waters Council are planning virtual content. Um, and I'll get it in a moment. I forgot to look it up, but the next Eastern Waters Council presentation is going to feature George Daniel. We're going to be highlighting him to FFI National, and I'll give you the date here when I have a chance to check. I want to just share, if you hadn't seen already, from the newsletter that issued this weekend and our Facebook posts, that our friend Steve Harris had passed away last Thursday. And Steve died suddenly. They believe he had a heart attack, and he was 74 years old. So if you're familiar with our club, you're familiar with Steve Harris. Steve joined the club back in 2007 at a beginner fly tying class that I think John Lively and I were teaching, and maybe some others. And he quickly became a leader. He joined the board of directors as the treasurer. He was the newsletter for an awful long time. He has been the kind of the coordinator of the fly fishing school ever since 2009. And not only that, he owned the Cayuta cleanup, although other people did, but he made sure that occurred. And there was a number of conservation projects we did on the Cohocton River that Steve led, fishing trips and social events. And I think we will remember him for his welcoming spirit, his smile, his dedication to our club. And in the beginner fly tying class on Thursday, the day he died, one of the students who knew Steve said that he reflects the soul of our club, and I think that's a good comment. I wanted to share the plans for Steve's memorial. I sent that out and posted the obituary on our Facebook page, but I have a couple things to add to that. There's a viewing and a memorial service on Thursday, this coming Thursday from 1 to 3. It's in Carpenter's funeral home in Corning. And on differing from what was said in the obituary, the memorial service is not a private service, but everybody that attends the viewing is welcomed and encouraged to attend the memorial service. It will be sharing memories from Steve's family. I committed to being there and represent what Steve did for the club. I thought I'd let you know that the club is sending flower arrangements. It's actually a potted plant, and we're going to decorate it with flies that people tied. So if you knew Steve and you'd want to participate with that, your flies need to, 1 or 2 flies need to be at the flower shop before they close on Wednesday at 2 p.m. So I will be sending out a note to the members here on this, but if you're not a member and still want to participate, just contact me, instant message me, whatever, and I'll get you the details. I talked to his wife, Joe, today, and in lieu of flowers, they had listed a charity, and she encouraged folks, if you want to memorialize Steve, instead of that charity, feel free to give a donation to our club, and we will be collecting those. Our intention is to use that for for youth education. And I'm also planning to hold a social night on Zoom to kind of share stories about Steve. And Steve's wife is going to join us, so that's really cool. She was always at the social event, so she's going to join us here. So just to let you know, we have some really great programs on the docket next month. Chris Walker, former club member, now director of R&D at Rio, is going to be speaking. And Bob is really busy making plans for an April and May speaker, and that's beginning to take shape. And we're doing a little kind of maneuvering to work with the Leon Chandler to you folks and accommodate the needs of speakers. And so we're not ready to announce the speakers yet. But there's some really cool names. Just to remind you that if you want to watch the video of this program or your buddy missed and you'd like to watch it, it will be posted up on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. These are taking a new look. If you haven't perused the Facebook page and liked it, it's time. And the YouTube channel is beginning to fill out, and we have a new playlist for the beginner fly tying class. We have the master classes, fly tying classes posting up, and it's starting to get fun. I'll just remind folks that we have a virtual auction that's been going on. It's on the 32 auction website. We are coming down to the last few weeks. We're coming down to the wire. And there's new items on the auction. There's reduced prices on the auction. We have eliminated all the buy now, so everything is now up for bidding. We'd encourage you to bid and bid generously to support our club, and to pass this link along to friends who might be interested. Lots of cool stuff, some brand new fly lines, some fly collections, rods, and fly tying material, and the coolest of all, our beer glasses. I just wanted to alert folks that we have a new way to support our club. And you will now find, thanks to the hard work of a number of people, John Lively and TC Owens and Vince Leonard come to mind, but there's others. We now have donate buttons on the Facebook page and on our website. And you can use these to make a donation to the club. And we really, really appreciate there's donations been rolling in as we have participation all around the country now. And folks are realizing the effort, and they're sharing their generous support either through the donate button or the old-fashioned send Vince a check plan. That works too. So thank you, everybody, for supporting the club, and thanks for the effort to make that easier with these buttons. I'll just share that the virtual fly tying efforts are underway in earnest. The beginner fly tying is now done 2 sessions, and that's being organized by Bill Wirtz. There's 7 students, and this is our first sessions fly. We were learning how to whip finish and attach materials, and this fly was just a practice fly, and my wife said, oh, it looks like it's a balding fly, let's call it the Rogaine fly. So we had a little competition, and Jeremy won the Rogaine fly competition. This up here is a screenshot from John Lively's Master Talk in this month. And believe it or not, he had more flies than we had time for. So we have a second session scheduled. And when I when I posted this up, I noticed that Steve Harris is right there. So I also want to share that the club invested some of our funds in some better equipment to support fly tying in a virtual future. So we purchased this camcorder. It's a real capable camcorder. And also with it a what's called a cam link, which allows the camcorder to integrate with a computer. We have a variety of support equipment, tripod, ring light, etc., that can accommodate an iPhone. And I've used this equipment for the beginner fly tying class. I actually used it for a presentation I gave on Monday to the Canandaigua TU chapter on bass fly fishing. So it's been used a couple times now, and the equipment is on the road. It's at John Lively's house getting prepped up for the master class, and it will circulate between the beginners and the master class users. And so appreciate the investment. The board of directors is investing in the virtual future. I think this is going to be really handy for a variety of uses in the future. Okay, so moving on, I'm going to turn things over to Bob to introduce our speaker.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, let me spotlight you, buddy.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm very happy to introduce our speaker tonight. He's a well-known Pennsylvania guide and fly fishing speaker, Josh Miller. Josh has competed on Fly Fishing Team USA for the past 4 seasons, and he also assisted with coaching in 3 World Youth Fly Fishing Championships. So he's not only on a regular U.S. team, but he helps coach the youth fly fishing team for Team USA. He's also an Orvis signature fly designer and is a guide for Trout Yeah Guide Service. So if you're looking for a good guide to show you the PA waters or to learn Euro nymphing, I highly recommend Josh as a guide, and you can look him up on Trout Yeah Guide Service. And tonight, Josh is going to be talking about his specialty, which is Euro nymphing techniques. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Josh.
Yeah, Josh, you're going to have to explain that picture with the smoke, man.
Yeah. Can you guys all see my screen, the presentation already?
Yes.
Awesome. Beautiful. Yeah. So that smoke is my first son coming in April. I'm so excited. He's still in the hatchery. He's getting stocked in April. Can't wait. Super excited about it. Yeah, it's kind of a shock, COVID shock, of course. But I just want to say thanks for having me today. I'm excited to share some stuff I've learned over the past years. First off, I want to say sorry about Steve, man. That's terrible to hear that about your club. It stinks, especially because we all know we can't be with people right now, and it just stinks even more when someone passes away. It's happened to me twice to two close family members here in the last while. So I feel you on that. It stinks, but hopefully on a good note, we have, you guys have some fun tonight, learn a little something, and just excited to be here. But so Zoom meetings are definitely been an interesting way to have a presentation. This is my 3rd presentation via Zoom in the last 2 weeks, so it's exciting. It's cool. Like my next Zoom meeting, I think it's out in like San Francisco and then Oklahoma. But it's neat though that this is connecting people from so vast, mileage between. Where it used to be we come in person and talk, which I love just as much, maybe more. Being there, seeing someone, in person, seeing the reaction, seeing when they fall asleep during my presentations. It's it's all part of it. But I just want to say thanks. So I'm sure cabin fever is setting in for everyone. It's setting in for me pretty hard. I just spent a week down in Florida fishing the flats down there in Tampa. That was pretty cool. caught some cool fish. Looking forward to spring. Got a few trips in the works, maybe to Iceland this year and Patagonia, Chile, maybe a couple other places that, you know, COVID willing or whatever. Getting ready for the spring season, you know, booking a lot of guide days already, getting excited about that. So like I said, my name's Josh and I've traveled some pretty cool places, got to fish with some pretty awesome anglers. And today's presentation, I named it Beyond the Basics, Euro Nymphing. So I talked with Kurt and Bob about your chapter. You guys had some awesome speakers. I mean, legendary people like George Daniel and Lauren Williams. And I heard a few other names. So it's hard to talk about something when, you know, people like that have shared their knowledge. They're just amazing people. But I'm going to share my little twist on some things. The thing about giving a presentation, especially when it's hard to have that connection with people, like I like instant questions or seeing faces. It's easier to know when my, you know, what I'm sharing is hitting home and it's connecting, you know, and I never know how deep to go on a subject or, you know, there's, especially Euro nymphing, it's such a big rabbit hole of so many thoughts and ideas. I could talk for days on it. So this presentation, I just kind of lay out a few thoughts, a few key things I think are really important if you guys are getting into it a little more deeper, and some basic stuff too. But I hope this, you know, you guys just learn a little bit of it. Please ask questions anytime. Like Kurt said, just hit your space bar and unmute so I can hear you. That'd be awesome. So cool. Why Euro nymphing? Whoever has done it in trout streams, especially moving quick, swift water, has found out pretty quickly that you're going to catch more fish most of the time. It's definitely a great way to be connected with your fly, have less tangles, get away from possibly fishing split shot and just weighted flies, get less tangles, lose less flies. It's definitely an awesome technique. Not just that, but being connected always with your fly, and you can manipulate that fly, you can jig it, you can swing it, it's just a great way to be in connection and actually fish your fly, be like almost have that connection between your arm, the rod, the line to the fly. Like instead of like an indicator, you know, you cast it out and it's going down its speed. When you're tight lining or Euro nymphing, you're more connected and you have the ability to manipulate that fly a lot more. So gear, the rods we're fishing 10 to 11 foot. I like fishing 10.5 foot rods, like 2 weights, 3 weights. Have most of you guys fishing longer rods? A couple of you guys out there? 2, 3, and 4. So when I'm fishing 2 weight, I'm fishing, you know, light tippet. It's going to protect my tippet better. I can fish 6, 7, even 8x at times on those 2 weight rods. On the other spectrum, like a 4 weight or a 5 weight is when I'm going to be fishing like a big fly, deep water, big egg or big stone, something that I need a stiffer rod to move that fly quicker in deep water to pierce that fish faster. Rods out there like Thomas & Thomas, Cortland, Sage ESNs, Helios, Recon. There's so many good companies out there making these rods now. And what we've noticed, or what I've noticed, especially having a little hand in some of the rod designing or whatever, I'm noticing the rods are becoming faster, and that is helping with the way the leaders are kind of going towards a lighter system, a little bit lighter leaders. These slightly stiffer rods, I feel cast and fish these leaders better, and we'll talk about that in a little while. Any questions on rods or anything?
So, Josh, I fish a 2 weight syndicate. It's a 10-foot rod, and I love the rod, and I've landed steelhead to 10 pounds. Tell folks about what would how would you go through defining a rod to select? There's so many. I encourage folks, like, if I can land a steelhead on a 2 weight, you can, you know, the rod weight, it doesn't have to do with your landing capability. But talk about that.
Yeah, in most situations, it definitely doesn't. In some situations, when you're fishing like a really, really wide river, like a lot of volume and flow, having a real slow rod will be a disadvantage at times. But those rods, you know, like this nymph rod on this picture, this 10.5 foot 2 weight. I mean, like the butt section of that rod is not. I mean, it's not like your average 2 weight or 3 weight or 4 weight. It's kind of like a 5 weight. Some of the rods even more, and that definitely gives you a lot of backbone and deep bend in those rods where you can play fish and not play them to exertion, but play them quickly and definitely land fish fast on these rods for sure. Like Kurt said, we've landed really big fish for sure on these rods. You know, if I'm fishing for bigger fish, I will, you know, not choose that 2 weight. I'll take a 4 weight or a 5 weight. But you can definitely land really big fish on light rods, like I said, without overplaying that fish and hurting that fish for sure. Definitely. Any other questions on rods? Cool. So leader material. In leader material, there's a lot of new stuff out there. There's some old stuff that's still good. With building leaders for Euro nymphing, there's Amnesia, which is stiff and it floats well. There's the bi-colored cider like Umpqua, Cortland, Rio, Honig makes that stuff. I use it from 5x, 4x to 0x, depending on the application and how I'm fishing. When building leaders, we use blood knot connections. I remember back in the day when I started this a long time ago, I used an Orvis knot or a double surgeon's knot. And man, the way the tags of those knots come out really grab your guides for sure. I don't know if you guys have used that in a leader. Like I said, I did a long time ago and it stunk. And then I learned the blood knot. And anyone who gets in this, I definitely encourage to learn blood knots and learn them quickly because it's definitely important. Also, you can use a little bit of like UV glue to put on the knot to slide through the guides well. In building leaders, I've always heard, especially growing up, of like tapers and turning over flies, turning over dry flies, having proper tapers, and it's definitely important. But I will say, with casting weight on a light leader system, less knots is better going through the rod. So having less transitional pieces for me works really well. We'll talk about leaders in a moment. But so connected to the fly line, I get this question a lot, especially, you know, I work at a fly shop in Pittsburgh, and being guide on the water, being a coach of the youth and just being out there, I definitely see a lot of loop to loop connections. And that's not, it works, but it's not, in my opinion, the best way to connect your leader system to your fly line. I like using mono fly line or Dacron fly line, but the mono, you can strip the coating off, revealing the core, and you can do a blood knot connection real small, 3-4 turn blood knot and make that really small and go through the guide. It's really nice. You can use a 3-4 turn nail knot. And there's also like a splice knot you could do with a needle. I've tried it a couple times and it works for some, it didn't work for me, but you know, having those other two knot connections is definitely nice. Any questions on leader material or anything? So building leaders is, I would say, definitely a big portion of learning Euro nymphing well. Back when I started, I just fished 20-pound Maxima to a cider, and it was super heavy, but it casted really well. It turned my flies over really well. But I noticed whenever I would lift and come into connection with everything, my flies would always end up right under my tip or really close to me. Does anyone ever have that happen to them? It's definitely a common thing. A lot of people ask, I start my drift out far, but when it gets to my tip, it's close. And that's because we're using leaders that are heavier. And the sag on the leader itself is just pulling the fly to your rod tip. And a lot of times when you cast across stream, it'll be pulling the fly across the stream, not straight downstream like it should be going, and making a bad drift that way. So lighting up the leader will definitely help, which gets me in my next point. And this is something I could talk about all night, but we'll just go over it kind of quick. So light leader versus heavy. If you can see in the photo, you see my rod going up, and then you can see the leader coming out of my rod. And it's, if you can see my rod's 10.5 feet, and that same kind of angles coming out of my rod, like I'm fishing pretty far away. And that's done well with a light leader. So back in, like I said, I used to fish 15-pound or 20-pound Maxima. In this, I'm fishing like an 10 to an 8-pound Maxima material, but it's actually the Cortland. Cortland came out with the material. It's Cortland camo. It's really nice stuff. It just turns over nice. It's thin. It just works really well for my leader system. And like everything I talk about tonight is, there's no wrong, there's no right. It's kind of just what works for you. You know, whatever works for you and your casting and your flies and your rod. You know, that's what the best part about this Euro nymphing or just fly fishing in general. And I mean, everyone knows this. At least I hope that, you know, there's no right or wrong. It's just, there's just a lot of cool info out there. But in my opinion, I like fishing the lighter leaders nowadays. I can fish further away. There's less sag on the flies. I can get a drift really far away without spooking fish. The downsides of that light leader, your accuracy and your turnover definitely goes away a little bit. We start using a cast we're going to call the 180 cast. And I'll show a video on that in a few minutes. But fishing distances, this leader is awesome.
Hey, Josh, a question on that
Yes, sir.
leader. So you're using 8-pound or 10-pound?
10 to 8, yes.
Just like
10 pound and 8 pound.
10-pound or 8-pound straight mono or straight, just tapered at all, or are you using like 30 feet of this?
No. Like, okay, so I try to keep I like to still have the fly line, that thin fly line in my hand. So maybe I'll do 5 to 6 feet of 10-pound and 4 feet of 8-pound. Okay, and then what I found out, a good transition piece. So when you're fishing Maxima or this Cortland stuff, straight to cider, the bicolored mono is very soft, so it has that sag in it. Correct? That's kind of like what we want, a little bit of sag. For going from such a stiff material to a soft material, I found it kind of, there's not a good transition. So I put 12 to 18 inches of fluorocarbon, the same X as my cider. So if I'm using 3X cider, 3X fluorocarbon, and it just makes it a little bit softer. It makes me be able to fish a little bit of a bow. We call that fishing in the drift, having a little bit of bow in my cider. Okay. So I try not to have that like 30-foot, that really long leader. There's benefits to it, but I still like having a little fly line, especially in the winter when it's cold, just to grab the line with my hands quickly.
And when you say fly line, you're using the Euro nymphing type of line?
Yeah, the thin Euro line.
Leader, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It still had like the Cortland or the Rio or Orvis still has some substance to it. You can still hold the line and you know, mend it. A lot of the fishing, you see in that photo, you can even see my hand. I think I'm probably figure eighting it with my other hand over there, you know, trying to keep in contact with those flies at all times. Super important.
So
Cool. Any questions on?
Yeah, Josh. Let me offer some interpretive comments here, and I'm going to ask a question. Is just for your background, like we've had Dom Swintowski, we've had George Daniel talking about European nymphing, and everybody has some different kind of suggestions of, and like you said, nobody's right, nobody's wrong. What I'd like to do is tell us a little bit more about why you're going with such a light setup. And then if you would be so kind for the new folks on the call, is take us from the fly line all the way to the fly. I Euronym, so I know what you're doing, but there's some that maybe are new.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why, like I said, doing doing Zoom meet or doing meetings in general to a vast amount of people, it's very hard to be able to cover all points, satisfy everybody, and get everybody on the exact same, track. It's tough, and that's why I try not to go too deep with these things, but I want to. I want to share like everything. It's tough, you know what I mean? It gets me excited. I love this stuff. But so to answer that question, so we'll have a thin Euro line. They're like 0.022. It's, I don't know, maybe like a one-way fly line. It's real thin, and it's gonna go down, and then I'm gonna take the coating off the fly line, revealing the core, which is monofilament, and I'm gonna do a blood knot connection there. If I'm just starting out, I'll use maybe, like if I have someone in the shop, never do it before, I'm gonna put them on 15-pound Maxima. I'm gonna do 3 feet of that. I'm gonna do 3 feet of 12-pound, and then 3 feet of 10-pound. It used to be 20, 15, 12, but 15, 12, 10, it's a little lighter. It's kind of a good all around. It's not too heavy. And then I'm going to put a little bit of maybe 18 inches, 12 to 18 inches of the same X as your cider. So the cider is the colored material that will be integrated in your leader. It's monofilament that'll help you see sights, show your drift, and that it's really important. So 15-pound, 12-pound, 10-pound, and then whatever extra cider is. So 12 to 18 inches of, let's say, 3X cider, and then 2 feet of 3X cider. And I'm going to put my tippet on the end of that cider material to 1 or 2 flies, depending on.
3 feet of cider?
I like 2 feet of cider, yeah.
2 feet, I'm sorry.
2 feet. And then down to my tippet. And that changes. That changes with wind. That changes if I'm going to do a dry dropper setup. That changes if I'm in really big water, really shallow water. That's where there's no right or wrong. There's just what works for you. And like you said, there's legends that have talked to you guys, like George and Dom and all those guys. They have their own spin-off on it, and it works for them, and they're awesome anglers for it.
So, Josh, you described before a lighter setup that used 5 to 6 feet of 10-pound and 4 feet of 8. So, tell me why does one want to go to a lighter back part of the leader?
It lets me fish lighter flies further away. It lets me fish lighter flies, and when I lift the cider off the water further away, it doesn't have too much weight where it sags and it pulls the flies back to me. I can definitely fish further distances, get the flies to sink faster. So if I'm fishing a little fly, okay, so here's kind of the deal in my mind, how it works to me. If I have a lot of volume of water and I have a heavy fly, my fly gets through the column of water, and then once it gets to that slower water on the bottom, it sticks on bottom, okay, because it's too heavy. Mm-hmm. If I have a lighter fly, and it'll get through the column, and then it will kind of roll down there. That's kind of the goal in my mind. I want to get it to that bottom current and not stick on bottom. I want it to just get there and roll, okay? So my key to the success I've had is trying to fish the lightest flies possible in every situation. When I fish a light fly on a slightly heavier leader, when I cast and tuck it in and then lift, the weight of the leader itself is going to speed up my fly, and it's going to pull it slightly to me. So having a slightly lighter leader, I can fish a little bit more distance with more vertical presentation.
Hey, Josh.
That's a lot of info. I'm sorry, but
yeah, we're getting a couple questions on the live stream.
We might be here for hours.
Yeah, I know it can be tough to explain. So a question again on the leader, and I think there's some confusion over. The question is, do you use the cider material with your light leaders?
I do. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So 10-8 cider, or 10-8, that transition piece of the same X of fluorocarbon, and then the cider.
Yep. So, and then you got something else on the other side of that, you said, right?
Yeah. Then some. Yeah. So 10-pound Maxima or that Cortland stuff. 8-pound Maxima or Cortland. Let's say 3X, 18 inches of 3X fluorocarbon, and 3X cider.
And then what comes after that?
Your tippet.
And how long is that?
Well, that depends on what you're fishing. So what I've found for a lot of anglers, there's kind of three variables. There's rod angle, there's weight of your fly, and there's tippet length. So when you get to the stream, those are the kind of things people ask. So like, well, how much tippet should I put on? And a thing that I found that kind of, it doesn't work all the time, but it helps to get someone at least to have the same thing they can work off of every time is just do your wingspan. So what I mean that is you stretch your arms out and do that amount of tippet. So if I'm 5 foot nothing, it's 5 foot nothing, you know. So I'm fishing the same amount, and it will show me the difference. I know this is like getting way down the rabbit hole, but this is when you start learning this stuff deeper, this is important. So the difference, if I have 5 feet of tippet and I fish a 2 millimeter, and then I have 5 feet of tippet and I fish it 2.4 millimeter, you're going to see there's a big difference in how the fly sinks and how the fly fishes. You know, if you have 3.5 feet of tippet and a 2 millimeter, it might fish the same as 5 feet and a 2.4 millimeter. So having that same tippet always will kind of show you the difference in how that fly is going to sink and fish, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's just a way to at least start understanding what the fly is doing under the water and be able to, you know, change your weights and adjust as needed.
Yeah. One other question on leader and tippet. Do you use a tippet ring?
You know, I used to, but I lose them. I just do a tiny little perfection loop on the end of my sighter and it works great. That was a lot for leaders. I knew it was going to be like that. But
It was a lot, yep.
I only have like 3 notes and I said like a million things, but sorry. Don't want to get too deep.
You don't use the tippet ring, huh?
I do not. Nope.
Oh.
It's just preference. No right or wrong, just preference. Just another thing to lose, in my opinion.
Josh, if I can interrupt, can I ask you, do you use droppers or do you use single fly rig?
I use both, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Thanks for the question.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for all the questions, guys. I love it. I love this stuff. Okay. So casting. Casting is important. So how I used to cast those heavier leaders, I used to do kind of the overhead lob cast where the leader kind of shoots way up into the air and hooks every tree in Pennsylvania. Now what I do is keep my rod really low, keep it on a level plane. I call it the 180 cast. And my flies never really go above my rod. I have a video, but it kind of is a little glitchy here. I'll show it to you guys. Let's see if it works.
So my cast, my flies are close to me, and to get them out, what I'm gonna do is cast upstream, little line out, flip back downstream, and let some line out. And now I'm locked and loaded. My flies are tight downstream. What I'm gonna do now is keep my rod tip low and cast in a straight line, kind of like you're throwing a frisbee. Cast. And what I do is I stop early instead of pushing my arm all the way forward. And what that'll do is when you stop early, it'll help the leader turn over, and it'll help you with connection faster.
You see, I keep my rod really low. Keep that rod really low, and it will never go up. It won't go up in the trees that way. I have trees all around me. That video work for everybody? Cool.
It was a little choppy.
Yeah, I don't know how to. It was clear on my end. I'm not sure. It must be the connection somehow.
Yeah, the internet and Zoom kind of, if it can't fit it through the pipe, it makes it smaller.
So, casting, before we move on, because it's super important to me, the casting is the foundation of every drift. You know, so your casting is important. It sets up every drift. You know, when we're on a guide day or coaching or doing whatever, you know, when I see someone just casting, I can see they don't have hope in what, what they're doing. And having a cast, making the cast, believing in the cast, super important. So one of the youth kids, Cam, said this to me, and it hit home. He's like, I make a cast and I expect to fish that drift, every drift, and have that expectation and have that willingness to catch a fish definitely will help, make every cast count. So when I do that, I just keep, did that make sense in the video? I keep my rod low on a straight plane, and then the leader never shoots up into the air, up into the trees. And you can cast way under things. Like I can have a tree limbs 15 feet under. I can shoot that sucker right under there. It's pretty easy. So what we're doing is using the water to load the fly. It's anchoring the water downstream. I'm using the weight of the fly to flick. I'm even putting a little haul into my leader and fly line, and then I'll load the rod and flick that nice and easy. Any questions on that?
Josh,
Fly.
there was a question on Facebook, and I'm not sure if you answered it or not. They were wondering how you did that 180-degree cast with the tree downstream of you.
I will keep my rod at all times. I won't. The key kind of I notice when I watch an angler. So I taught an angler to do it, and I'm watching them. When they'll break their wrist and kind of always want to go back to a roll cast. And right when you do that, the leader shoots straight up into the air. So I'll just keep my rod and my wrist kind of straight and just keep it on a plane, a straight plane, and just flick it back and forth up and downstream real easy. And you can still tuck cast that way. You can put a little haul into it. You can stop early and then drift your arm out, giving it a little bit of slack, and that'll give it a tiny tuck. There's tricks to manipulate your rod tons of ways. It's pretty cool. So fly design, I like to keep it simple, just simple patterns. The key to the success is weight, multiple weight. So if you told me, when I start fly fishing that the drift was the most important, I slowly learned that over time. The drift's the most important thing. Would most agree with that? At this point, I would say that the weight of the fly is just as important. Having the right weight of flies is just as important as the drift itself, because they go hand in hand, of course, too. So having flies of multiple weights is key. That being said, sometimes having a 2mm or a 2.4 or a 2.8 or a 3.2, one of those might fish that run better or fish that stream better at that time or at that flow. So if you fish at that stream at 100 CFS or you fish at 200 CFS, you might need a different weight to fish that stream properly. Does that make sense? So when I purchase flies as a consumer, as a fly fisherman, I might not know the weight of the fly, and I don't know the adjustments, and I might not have flies in multiple weights. So being a tire along with a fisherman, I think is really important for nymphing. Being able to know your weight and to be able to adjust and have 1 to 10 patterns in a lot of weights. So I'll have a few key anchor flies from 2.0, 2.3, 2.5, 2.8, 3.0, 3.2, 3.5, 3.8, 4.0. I don't need all those weights at all the times, but sometimes I'm fishing one fly and I have a 2.5 on, and I'm like, it's a little light, so I'll switch to a 2.8 and catch a fish right away. Sometimes it's just that simple. Sometimes it's not. But having a lot of flies with a lot of weights having a few flies and a lot of weights is super important to me. A couple things with flies. So thin, someone asked about keeping flies thin earlier, and that correlates with what I said a few minutes ago, where I want the fly to get to the bottom and not stick on bottom. So having a thin fly with thin, like not too much weight on it, will cut the current and it'll get to that slower water and not just stick on bottom. Or like, let's say I have a huge stone fly and I put 30 wraps of 30 lead in it and a 4mm bead, I might be able to get that fly to sink as fast as a really thin fly with a moderate size bead because there's so much bulk to that thick stonefly. A lot of water is going to hit that stonefly and push it downstream quickly. Does that make sense? But sometimes, okay, so let's say we're fishing Spring Creek in State College. It just blew out. It's coming down, but it's still chocolate. And it's summertime, and those pockets are only like this deep, all right? And it's still really dirty. We might not want a big, heavy fly. Sometimes I'll tie a really big fly with very little weight in it, so it will sink really slow. In that dirty water, the fish might see it way better. And that's a trick to fishing edges and shallow water if it's dirty, fishing a big fly with very little weight in it. Another thing we do is called fishing the fall, or when you cast the fly out and you're not tight, but you're connected and the fly is just naturally sinking. Has anyone casted a fly and the fish eat it like almost instantly before you even make connection? That's what I call fishing the fall. And that fly is just naturally kind of fluttering down there. Having different size weight and bead, you can fish different rates of sink, and that'll you pick up different fish that way too. You see, flies are, that's just pretty simple, and it looks like something actually. So we talked about that a minute, knowing your weight, being able to adjust and reading your sighter. So what do I mean reading your sighter? When I make a cast, my fly might be too light and my sighter might be just kind of soft going downstream quickly. Or I'll cast and my sighter's really tight right away and just kind of stretch down. I know maybe my weight is too heavy. So being able to see your sighter and knowing your weight. So if you tie your flies and you know that's a 3.0, then you'll be able to switch maybe to a 2.5 and be able to fish it properly. Does that make sense? Any questions on any of that stuff?
Yeah, we do have one question from the live stream. How can you tell if you're fishing the right weighted fly?
A lot of it just comes with time on the water. We can have 100, you can go with 100 different guides, but the best teacher is catching a fish. The more you just catch fish, the more you'll see what weight works, what weight doesn't. And then, you'll come, like my friend Joe fished with me all the time. We went out the other day, we walked to the stream. He's like, you didn't even put a fly on. I was like, no, I want to look at the water first. Cause I haven't seen that stream in that area for a while. And then I saw the water and I kind of thought and had an idea of what I think the weight should be right away. So seeing the water, knowing what you're fishing, it just takes time.
Yeah, it's part of the analysis. If you're hanging up every time, you've got too heavy a fly, or you got to move it faster, right?
Well, and that's, yes. And what has worked for me, which is different thought process than a lot of other amazing anglers that are better than me, I fish lighter, and I'd rather be slightly higher than the fish going through the water column, and I'm not hitting bottom at all, and I get no false readings. I don't tick bottom. My sighter's not jiggling. I don't know what isn't a fish and what is a fish. If I'm lighter and higher, if bites are really easy, boom, see the sighter, bang, fish. It doesn't work always like that, but I would rather fish a little lighter, not just drag bottom and hit bottom. And that's how I've had a lot of luck, a lot of success.
We had another question about how far are you typically casting?
It's hard to say. A rod length, maybe 2 times more than my rod length. So 10, 20, 30 feet at times. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sometimes further, sometimes less, depending on if it's small, tiny pockets. Okay, so if I can get the closer to the fish you can get without spooking them, the more luck, the more success you're going to have, just because you can control your drift better. You can set the hook quicker. You can catch the fish faster. At times I like fishing far because it makes me feel like I'm doing something better. I don't know. I like casting and fishing further away. So that photo is actually a really cool stream we fished in the Czech Republic in the World Championship for the youth. And this is that same stream down there. It's just awesome. It's really hard to navigate. It's tannic water, and it would be like putting these big rocks just on top of each other, and there's no bottom, there's no gravel in there, so your foot just gets lost in all these rocks, but it's pretty awesome fishing. awesome. You know, those pockets are just great for this technique. Okay, one fly versus two. So this is a good thing for beginner or advanced angler. I had a guy the other day tell me, you know, he fishes 3 flies a lot. I'm like, man, I'm maybe there's some secret in that works really well, but you know, 3 flies just means I'm losing 3 at a time in the trees. You know what I mean? So I stick to 1 or 2. So if I'm fishing small streams, brushy streams, a lot of overhead trees, shallow water, I'm fishing 1 fly. 1 fly comes out of the tree 50% more than 2 flies. 2 flies never comes out of the tree. You know, 1 fly, you know, you can wiggle it out a lot more of the time. A competitor's approach to this, one thing that's helped me as a competitor do well was when the fish are very active and I'm catching a lot, fish 1 fly. Less getting tangled to the net, less getting tangled, just, you know, fish are eating, fish 1 fly. You're just gonna catch, you know, sometimes you have to fish 2, but 1 definitely does well. When I fish 2, it's gonna be fishing slow, wintertime, deeper water, waist to chest deep, wide runs, big flowing uniform current, rainbow trout, when fish are in the column higher. So fish will suspend and I'll have 1 fly deeper and 1 fly higher, holding that fly up. And, you know, sometimes that'll do really well. Fish in streams a lot of times don't look down, they look straight ahead or up. So that's why, you know, I like to fish up, fish above and fish in the column. And rainbow trout like to suspend a lot of the time. You're not going to catch a fish if the fly's dragging on bottom and you're below the fly. 2 flies, dry dropper. I fish with your nymphing a lot of times, a dry fly and a nymph underneath a dry dropper too. But that's a totally different topic. We're not talking about that at all. Any questions on any of that stuff?
Nope.
I have another question for you, Josh. And it goes back to the view of your fly box. You had a few patterns in multiple weights. My question is, how do you differentiate one weight from another when the flies are out of your box and not organized in nice little rows like that?
So thank you for the question. So there's a few ways to do it. There's no, I definitely get it mixed up. I'm not gonna lie. What I found is I'll change bead color between like the in-between sizes. And I can tell a difference between a 2.5 and a 3.0 real easy. And that comes with time. Even in my fingers, I can kind of tell sometimes. But when they're small and in between sizes, it's hard to tell. What I did do for a while, that 2.8, I would get just a black Sharpie and I'd go right across all the beads when they're in my box. Right across the beads. And then I could see which ones had that black mark on the back of the bead, and that would help.
So you're differentiating by color?
At times, yeah. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for the question. Anyone sleeping or anything yet?
Hey, Josh,
Is that a wake-up call?
you want to talk about it? So I use a grain scale when I can't remember. And it's been a godsend to figure out what I tied the last time. And a lot of folks have grain scales because they use them for shooting. Do you want to talk about that a little?
You know, I use that long, like I saw legend Devin Olson showed us that, and George a long time ago. I use it for a little bit. At this point, I don't do that at all. All my flies do not have lead in them. I don't use lead at all. I don't want 2 reasons.
No.
When I'm putting lead, I'm making.
Me. I'm sorry. I wasn't. I use a grain scale to weigh the fly. Then, if I can't remember the damn bead size, then I can tell what the weight of the fly is. And to answer, I think it was Jerry's question, is if I lose track of that, then that's my truth teller.
Sure. Yeah, I used to, I guess this is answering like another thing and your question at the same time.
Okay.
I used to use lead and stuff in my flies so I'd have like a 2.5 with lead and then a 2.5 without lead. And then I would use that scale to kind of see which ones were which and where they kind of, where a 2.5 with lead was the same weight as a 3.0. And it got way too confusing and way too much. Keep it simple, man. So I don't use any lead in any fly. 2 reasons. That was the one. And I don't want to, it starts making my fly bulky. Also, I don't want to throw lead in, you know, obviously it's just a tiny little bit, but any less lead in the environment's a good thing too. But having that grain scale, at this point, I can kind of just tell by looking at the bead. And if I can't, my dad just ends up with the flies anyways. So there's a big bin I just give to him once in a while. And he'll just catch fish on anything. So it doesn't matter to him. So.
Hey, Josh, another quick question. I'm sure you're just using tungsten beads, right? Nothing else?
I have used some brass. There's been times where I've used some brass on like a dry dropper fly, like real shallow, skinny water. But most of the time I'm fishing tungsten flies. Yeah. Cool. And this is a situation where this grayling, this was in the Czech Republic, we were fishing. And this is where that fishing above the fish was important. The fish, like you could put flies real close to these fish and they wouldn't eat it. Anytime it was like in the drift high, they'd come up off the bottom and eat the fly. Super cool. Definitely awesome, you know, being able to, very honored, blessed, and lucky to be able to travel to so many really cool places and seeing these fish react to different things, you know, and bringing that technique home and learning, you know, and watching fish just react to different things is really cool. And you learn so much from it. Sometimes it makes us think weird things that work, and then sometimes it doesn't work, you know? So it's just really cool, really cool. So one more technique we're really going to talk about for a minute is floating the cider. Has anyone tried this in the Zoom meeting? This will change your you know, your game. This is definitely an important part of the tight lining aspect. So what this is, you fish the same leader or a heavier leader, and we use a wax or grease and grease the leader from the end of the fly line, even some of the fly line, through the maxima, through the leader, through the cider, to the tippet ring or your loop that I put on there. And we'll wax it and it'll float. And so what we'll do is we'll cast. So if you see my body in this photo, it's really clear. This is Slovenia. Crazy clear, extremely spooky fish, and it's very shallow. I can't tight line this regularly. You're just going to spook them. So what I'll do is I'll make that cast all the way to those branches up there, and my rod's low and my leader is floating on the surface of the water. And what that does is that fly is just going to naturally fall, like we talked about earlier. It's going to fish the fall, and those fish are going to pick up on it. The little bit of surface tension that the leader and the cider gives will just keep that fly moving slightly down through the water. It'll go, you know, like when you're fishing an indicator and it'll slow down and go like a third less than the speed of the water, like a normal like airlock or thingamabobber. That's kind of what this cider will do. It'll do that or even slower. And that'll fish far, far away. You can also fish this every normal drift you make. So what it will do is you can fish a lighter fly, cast further, let it float, and then slowly lift your leader with mending with your opposite hand, pulling the slack out, and that'll get the fly to sink to depth, and then you can come in connection and do a normal tight line drift. So floating the cider helps you fish spooky fish at a distance, and it'll also help you with your normal setup fish further away, and you can pick up fish on that fall like I was talking about. A lot of info, dang. I'm talking too much, I just realized.
That's great. It's great info.
Too much info. Sorry, guys. Like I said, that's why, like, when someone says do presentation, I'd rather someone say, well, do this and this, because I could go off forever. Like, I'm sure you can feel the love I have for this stuff. I just love it. But all right, so floating the cider in windy conditions. Like I've had times like this is in Patagonia, dude. I'm telling you what, you've ever fished in wind? This was like 50 miles an hour this day, 60 miles an hour. I think I lost that hat literally, like it was gone, like crazy. But in a lot of people or you fish here in Pennsylvania or New York or wherever on the East Coast, and then you go out west in the middle of the day and you're just like, holy crap, it's so windy, like it's crazy. So you got to figure out what to do, what to change for the wind. So you can change and adapt your leader, fish slightly heavier flies, keep your rod angle very low. See, my rod is very low to the water, and then use that sighter floating technique at a distance, and you can still be productive. Definitely. So this is one more video I have in here on floating the sighter.
So I'm fishing these soft little pockets on the edge of the river. The water's really cold. It's 34 degrees. I just got a whole bunch floating the sighter right on the edge of this fast water, right in that soft stuff. Let's see if there's another one there.
Shallow water, like I couldn't get too close. So what I would do in that situation was shallow. It was slow moving. You see, there's like those seams, very slow. If I got too close, I'd spook them. What I would either do is throw a dry dropper or do that sighter floating thing. I can fish far enough away and not spook those fish. Okay, so a couple tips to get flies deeper. So like you heard, I like to fish lighter flies. First tip, number one, right off the bat, fish thinner tippet. It'll definitely help your fly sink faster. It'll help it slow down. But most of all, it'll help that fly to move naturally. If you put a fly on 5X and you just hold it out, you'll see it's very stiff and it'll like sag. You put it on 6X and it's going to sag less. You put it on 7X and it's going to hang. That thin, light tippet definitely lets that fly, quote, swim or move a little bit more naturally in the water. So the thinner the tippet, the faster it's going to sink, the more realistic-ish it's going to be. Second is, like I said, to float the sighter or introduce slack when you make your cast. So make a cast, let everything hit the water. You can even mend your sighter upstream, letting those flies sink to depth before you come in contact. Cast further upstream. Do use that all legendary cast we know called the tuck cast, and that'll help to push that fly quicker into the water. If anyone doesn't know that cast, just search Uncle Joe Humphreys. He has everything awesome out there with that. And the last one is rod angle. Knowing how to adjust your rod angle will help those flies sink quicker, to get to depth quicker. With more vertical rod angle or an invert rod angle, which we call the Colorado drift. So where you cast and instead of leading the flies, you actually let the flies lead you for a moment, and that'll let the flies sink very, very, very quickly, actually. Any questions on that stuff?
Nope.
Okay.
I think we're good.
One last thing here. I learned from a really awesome guy, a world champion from Spain, and he said, don't hold your arm out. So that's Joe, Uncle Joe over there. He's holding his arm way out. Try to keep your elbow bent at all times. And this will go for everybody. We all want to fish that next seam over there and just push our arm to the limit. Man, I'll tell you, my arm is not the best shape from doing this many years, and definitely holding my arm way too far out there. Definitely bend your elbow, keep it in tight. You'll be able to fish longer days, make better drifts even. You need to fish further away, get a longer rod. But don't hold your arm out. It'll make for a lot. I know this sounds so basic, but like almost every day I take a person on the water on a guide day. Even myself, I find myself pushing my arm out. It's no good. Keep your elbow bent like this. Keep it nice down and bent. It's definitely important. But that's all I have for you guys today. And I just want to say that before I sign off, I want to say thanks. I want to say thanks for tuning in and watching us. I want to say thanks for hosting these meetings, keeping fly fishing relevant, and keeping it going. Thanks for the conservation efforts. Super important, getting kids into this stuff. even having, all of us do the right thing on the water and just share knowledge and just love the sport. But this technique, as well as everything in fly fishing, it's growing, it's evolving, it's living. The things we did 5 years ago isn't the same thing I do today, isn't the same that I'm going to do next year. And that's what's so cool about this. It's changing always. There's new things out there. There's better anglers. There's so many awesome materials and techniques, and the rods are getting better. And you guys know this, but that's what makes this so cool. And it's just constantly changing and growing. And that's why, everyone just keep on learning, keep on asking questions, keep on growing as anglers. The best thing, catch fish and learn from someone better than you. And that's all I'm going to say today. Any other questions before we go?
Just want to say thanks a lot. I picked up a lot of information.
Awesome. I have some YouTube videos. I'm trying to put those out more on techniques and stuff. And you can go to my website, troutyeah.com. I do guiding in central Pennsylvania, western Pennsylvania, teaching these techniques. I love it. But
I did have one question.
Sure.
So this technique, do you think it's I'm sure like anything's there's places where it's better and it's places where it's not as good. So I saw some of the streams you showed there had very high gradients, like that.
Yes.
You could see they're coming on a mountainside.
Yeah.
A lot of them around here are fairly flat.
Sure.
Is it more challenging to use this technique in these types of streams that we have around here in New York?
It is and it isn't in a way. It is because you have to fish further and you have to fish maybe more of that light leader or more of a floating cider. When it's fast, the turbulence of the water keeps it so the fish don't see you as much and the fish react to the fly sometimes faster. The slower the water, the more the fish look at the fly. Yes and no. It's you could still do awesome doing techniques like this on slow water. The more I fish, the more I enjoy actually fishing the slow stuff now. I like fishing that. It's a little more challenging. It's more rewarding at times.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, thanks for the question.
Hey, Josh, when you're floating a leader, what do you use for floating?
There's Loon has, I think it's called High Floats. There's Mucilin. Orvis has a wax of sorts. Anything that's sticky is going to stick better and float longer.
Okay.
You have to reapply it pretty often. Even when I'm not floating the cider and I'm just fishing, like I said, a regular day, just a regular technique, I'll still grease at least my cider and float the cider for a few seconds or a split second each cast to let the fly sink. And just change the cast too. Be dynamic. Every cast, change how you approach it. The not the worst thing, but not the best thing is to be robotic and do the same cast over and over and over and over. Change it. Throw a little slack in here. Be real tight one cast. Let the whole thing float one cast. Every time you fish, just do something slightly different, and that'll definitely help you catch more fish.
Cool.
Any other questions?
Let me check Facebook here.
There was one more on Facebook. Do you think they're going to have the youth fly fishing program this year?
I sure hope so. Yeah, man, I sure hope so. We all want to get out there. It stinks with the world situation, and we're all limited to travel. I lost a couple really awesome trips and lost out on tons of good guiding, and hopefully with vaccines or whatever happens, I hope for sure. Hopefully we could do a lot more stuff and get together and all of us can fish someday.
Absolutely.
I'm not seeing anything else on Facebook.
I think I went over time a little bit.
Oh no, I think
I tried to speed it up there. I get stuck on things.
No. If you would have gone past 9, we would have stopped you.
Did anyone fall asleep though? Anyone close?
Nobody has reported that.
All right, good.
It
Thanks,
is a hard
guys.
thing to see on Facebook for sure. Well, thank you,
Well, I
Josh.
hope it was Yeah.
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you. And we wish you well. And maybe sometime we'll be able to go back to the fly fishing shows and see you there.
Yeah. Before I go, I would love to share, like I said, my phone number's down there. I would love to tell anyone to reach out anytime with questions. Like, I like to be, anyone can approach me at any time and ask anything. Like, no problem. I'll take call. I think my wife's on her lunch break. She's like, "How many calls have you been on today?" I'm like, "Babe, it's like my 10th call." I love to be able to share anything with anyone who wants to learn. So feel free to reach out anytime, guys. Thanks again. Thanks for having me.
One quick question in that regard. What shop are you with down there?
I work for International Angler in Pittsburgh. It's in Robinson Township. Awesome shop.
Okay. Good. Thanks.
Thanks
Awesome.
again, guys.
Thanks, Josh.
See you next time.
Yep. Good night, everybody.
See ya.
Okay, we ended the live video. We're cool. All right. Good night, everybody.